The night had that strange, heavy silence you only feel when the world seems to pause. I was standing by my window, staring at the street lamp outside, its pale light flickering like it was tired of burning, when I heard a voice that made me shiver. "The night feels endless," my neighbor said. Her words came soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, but there was something in her tone, restless, urgent, that pulled me out of my own thoughts. I'd known her for months, just casual hellos and nods when our paths crossed. But tonight, the way she leaned against her doorway, shadows dancing over her face, made it impossible to ignore her. It was like she was carrying something heavy inside, something she couldn't leave at home. I stepped closer to my door, hesitant, trying to read the expression I couldn't quite place. "Then, let's make it ours," I replied, almost before I realized what I was saying. My voice sounded steadier than I felt, but her sudden tilt of the head and the faint, surprised smile that flickered across her lips told me I'd said the right thing, or maybe the wrong thing. The air between us was electric, charged in a way I didn't understand. A strange kind of promise, or a warning. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the dim streetlight, and I felt like I was staring into a storm I didn't know I'd agreed to face. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but something in her posture told me the answer wasn't simple. She turned slightly, glancing down the quiet street, and the shadows around us seemed to stretch, as if the night itself was waiting. I realized, with a cold little twist in my chest, that whatever she was thinking, it wasn't something I could step into casually. Yet, for some reason I couldn't explain, I was drawn toward it, toward her. The night felt endless, just like she said. And now, I was standing on the edge of it, aware that stepping forward meant leaving my ordinary world behind. There was a tension in the air, like holding your breath underwater, knowing that any second could change everything. I didn't notice how long I had been standing there, heart pounding, until she finally spoke again. "Are you sure?" Her voice was softer this time, almost fragile, but it carried the weight of someone who had seen things most people never would. I hesitated, caught between fear and curiosity, between caution and the irresistible pull of the unknown. I wanted to back away, slam the door, forget this moment ever happened, but I couldn't. Something in her eyes promised me a night that would never feel ordinary again, and I found myself nodding, silently agreeing to something I didn't yet understand. The shadows seemed to move closer. The street lamp flickered one last time, and then she whispered, almost to herself, "It begins when the world falls asleep." And that's when I realized I might not be ready for what comes next. I've always been the kind of person who blends into the background. Quiet, predictable, careful. My days were ordinary. Work, groceries, the occasional evening scrolling through my phone. Nothing thrilling, nothing dangerous. And yet, somehow, that night made me realize how little I truly knew about the people around me, especially her. Her name was Lila. She'd moved into the apartment next to mine nearly a year ago, but our interactions had been nothing more than polite nods in the hallway or the occasional borrowed cup of sugar. She had a way of slipping in and out of the world quietly, like she existed on the edges of life, always watching, always just out of reach. And maybe that's why, when she said the night felt endless, it hit me harder than I expected. I remembered the first time I saw her properly, standing in the courtyard, brushing her long, dark hair back from her face as she looked at the sky. She didn't notice me at first, and I almost didn't approach. But there was a loneliness in her stance, a kind of waiting that made me feel like the universe had nudged us together without either of us realizing it. Over time, those small glances and brief conversations had built something strange between us, an unspoken understanding, a shared curiosity. And then there was the apartment itself. Mine was simple, predictable, safe. Lila's was different. Even from the outside, I could see hints of her personality. The faint smell of something spicy and floral drifting from her window, the curtains that were never fully drawn, the odd trinkets and lights that seemed to pulse with life when the sun went down. It was a place that hinted at secrets, at stories I wasn't meant to know yet. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the tension in her voice, the way she looked at me as if she were daring me to choose between safety and something far riskier. I knew there was a reason she felt the night was endless. Something in her world made the darkness stretch, made hours feel like lifetimes. And yet, I felt a pull I couldn't ignore, a mix of fear and thrill that made my skin tingle. It wasn't just curiosity. There was something else, too. I realized I wanted to be part of it. Not because I knew what I was walking into, but because I sensed it would change me. The ordinary version of my life had been fading for weeks, maybe months, and now it felt like it had no choice but to collide with hers. I didn't know what awaited me in the shadows. I didn't know the line I was about to cross, or the decisions I would be forced to make. All I knew was that she was waiting, and the night, endless and alive, was calling us both. And then, just as I was about to step toward her door, she turned her head slowly, eyes narrowing slightly, and whispered, almost as if she could see through me. Some doors, once opened, never close again. And with that, the ordinary world I'd clung to began to crumble. The door to her apartment was slightly ajar, a thin line of warm light spilling onto the hallway. I hesitated, heart hammering, wondering if stepping inside would feel like crossing a threshold or falling into a trap. But Lila didn't move. She just watched me, eyes unreadable, as if daring me to follow. The moment I stepped inside, the world outside seemed to vanish. Her apartment was nothing like mine. Chaotic, alive, yet somehow inviting. Shadows clung to corners, flickering against walls lined with strange objects I couldn't identify at first glance. Candles, glass bottles, trinkets, and books stacked in precarious towers. The air smelled of smoke and something sweet I couldn't name, like danger and comfort wrapped together. "I've been waiting for someone," she said softly, not looking at me. Her fingers traced a line along the edge of a table, careful but deliberate, like she was preparing for something. Someone who might understand, or at least try. I wanted to ask what she meant. I wanted to turn around and run, but my feet wouldn't move. Something about her presence, her voice, the tension in the room, held me there. Then came the first hint that this night was different. She pulled a small box from a shelf and opened it. Inside were objects that made my stomach twist, photographs, letters, and tiny trinkets that felt personal, private. I recognized the edges of something familiar, the things you hide from everyone but yourself. She glanced at me, eyes sharp now, almost accusing. "You have to choose," she said, "to stay or to leave. Once you're here, it's not just a night anymore. It's a world that takes everything from you and gives back something you can't name yet." I tried to speak, but my voice failed me. My mind raced with questions, doubts, fears, but also a pull I couldn't resist. What was she offering? And why did I feel, deep in my bones, that I had already crossed the line by being here? Suddenly, a sound, a soft, almost imperceptible creak from the far corner of the room, made both of us freeze. It wasn't the building settling. It wasn't the wind. Something else. Watching. Waiting. Lila's eyes darted toward the corner, tense, alert. "You weren't supposed to notice that yet," she whispered, almost to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. And in that instant, the air shifted. The room felt smaller, the shadows longer, and the feeling of endlessness pressed against me like a living thing. I realized I didn't know what I had stepped into, but whatever it was, it had been waiting for someone, and now it had me. The room seemed to breathe around me. Every shadow flickered like it had a life of its own. Every candle cast more than just light. It cast questions I didn't want to answer. Lila moved silently, almost gliding, carrying the small box closer to me. My chest tightened, my pulse hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked, her voice low, almost trembling, yet commanding. She didn't wait for an answer. "The night, it stretches. It's endless for a reason. And tonight, it's alive." I swallowed hard. Alive? I had no idea what she meant. My mind kept flicking back to her warning. Some doors, once opened, never close. And now, standing here in the center of her dimly lit apartment, I felt it. The weight of something pressing down, watching, waiting. She opened another drawer and pulled out a long, thin object wrapped in velvet. My stomach twisted as she carefully unwrapped it. It wasn't just an object, it was a tool, a key, a warning. I couldn't look away. The candlelight caught its edges, making it gleam, but I couldn't tell if it was dangerous or sacred, or both. "You're not like anyone else," she whispered, almost to herself. Then she looked at me with an intensity that made my knees go weak. "Most people run. Most people don't last past the first hour. But I think maybe you will." I wanted to speak, to ask her what she meant, but my tongue felt heavy. Instead, I nodded, even though I didn't fully understand. Something in her presence made the ordinary rules of life, work, bills, routines, feel meaningless. Time had slowed. The night truly did feel endless. And I realized I had no idea how I had gotten here, or how I could leave. Then came the sound. A whisper at first, so soft it was almost swallowed by the candlelight. And then another, and another. They weren't coming from her. They were coming from the apartment itself, or maybe the night outside. A chorus of voices, low, urgent, pleading, yet impossible to understand. Lila froze, her fingers gripping the velvet object tightly. "They're here," she said. Not a question, a statement. My heart stopped. "If you hear them, it means you're part of it now." Part of what? My chest tightened, panic and curiosity tangled together. The shadows in the corners seemed to inch closer, reaching for us, stretching impossibly long. The floor creaked beneath my feet, though I knew no one had moved. Something was moving, something unseen. Her eyes locked onto mine. "I should have warned you," she whispered. Her voice cracked, a tremor running through it, but her gaze was sharp, unyielding. "But now it's too late. You've stepped inside, and the night, it doesn't let go." Before I could process what she meant, the apartment plunged briefly into darkness. When the light returned, something had changed. The shadows were heavier, thicker, almost solid. And in the corner where the whispers were strongest, a shape began to form, a shape I wasn't ready to see. And then Lila stepped back, her expression suddenly tense, almost fearful. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," she murmured. I could feel it, the night waiting, alive, patient, ready to strike. And whatever was coming, I knew my life was about to change forever. The shape in the corner shifted, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't human, or at least, not entirely. Shadows clung to it like smoke, twisting and writhing. Yet I could make out faces. Hundreds of them. Twisted, pleading, angry faces, pressed into the darkness as if trapped there forever. Lila's hand flew to her mouth, and for the first time, fear overtook her control. I didn't think anyone would see them," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They're the ones who stayed too long." Before I could ask what she meant, the shadows surged forward, closer, almost alive, and the voices rose into a cacophony of despair. My head spun. I realized then, the endless night she'd spoken of, it wasn't just a feeling. It was a prison. And worse. Her gaze met mine, wide and desperate. "You're not just a witness," she said, her voice trembling. "You've become part of it. The night doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. And now it wants you to." I wanted to step back, run, anything, but the room had changed. The walls seemed to pulse, the shadows moving with a will of their own. The line between Lila, the night, and me blurred. Something told me there was no turning back. Not tonight. Not ever. The shadows surged like a living tide, swallowing the corners of the room and pressing against me with a cold, relentless weight. Faces twisted in agony, reaching out from the darkness as if trying to drag me into their world. I stumbled back, heart hammering, lungs burning, and realized there was no way around this. The night demanded surrender or resistance. Lila stepped forward, holding the velvet-wrapped object tightly. "You have to choose," she shouted over the rising cacophony, her eyes fierce but desperate. "Either accept the night, or fight it." My hands shook as I grabbed it. The moment I touched the object, a jolt ran through me, like electricity and fire at the same time. Memories, sensations, and fears that weren't my own flooded my mind. The whispers, the faces, the endlessness. I understood, suddenly, what she had been trying to warn me. The night was a living prison of lost souls, and it fed on fear, curiosity, and hesitation alike. But I didn't hesitate. With everything inside me, I focused on one thing, not letting the darkness claim me. I pictured the dawn, the ordinary world waiting outside her apartment, and I willed it into existence. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in a way that felt like 100 hearts breaking at once. Lila's hand found mine, guiding, grounding me, as if together we could force the night to bend. And for a moment, it worked. The shadows withdrew into the corners, the whispers faded, and the room felt still. Relief crashed over me in waves. I thought it was over. Then I looked at Lila and froze. Her eyes were no longer hers. Hundreds of tiny, Flickering faces swam inside them, the same ones from the corner. She smiled at me, a smile that didn't reach her voice. "The night never really lets go," she said softly, almost tenderly. "It just finds a new keeper." I realized, too late, that in saving myself, I had shifted the burden. Lila had been the guide, the protector, but now she was free, and the night was mine. And as the shadows crept back toward me, whispering my name, I understood the cruelest truth. Some nights are endless, and some promises are eternal. The apartment was quiet now. Too quiet. The shadows had receded, curling back into the corners as if obeying some invisible command, but the air still felt heavy, thick with the memory of what had happened. I sank onto the floor, trembling, my hands clutching the velvet-wrapped object that had changed everything. My chest ached, not just from fear, but from the weight of responsibility I had inherited. Lila stood across the room, her expression softer now, almost human again, though the flickering faces in her eyes made her feel less real than she had before. She took a slow step toward me. "You did it," she said, voice low but filled with relief. "You resisted and survived." I wanted to thank her, to ask questions, but I found that words felt meaningless. How do you explain the night, endless and alive? How do you describe something that defies logic, time, and even fear itself? I realized that some experiences can't be shared. They can only be carried, quietly, in the heart. She knelt beside me, and for the first time, I noticed her hands. Small, delicate, yet steady. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "It's not just about surviving," she said. "It's about understanding. About knowing that even in darkness, you have a choice." I nodded, though the weight of the night still pressed against me. I felt changed, as if part of me had been left behind in the shadows, and part of me had emerged stronger, sharper, more aware of the fragile line between fear and courage. Lila smiled, genuinely this time, and I felt a flicker of warmth. Most people never see the night for what it is. They never get the chance to face it and come out the other side. You did. I wanted to believe her, to let the warmth linger, but I couldn't ignore the object in my hands. The velvet hiding something powerful, something that still whispered in the quiet. The night wasn't gone. It was waiting, patient and eternal, and now, I was its keeper. I looked at Lila one last time. She gave me a small, almost mischievous nod, then turned and walked toward the doorway. "Remember," she said over her shoulder, "the night may be endless, but you're the one who decides what to do with it." The door closed softly behind her, and I was alone. I let out a shuddering breath, feeling the night settle around me like a cloak. My life would never be ordinary again. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a guardian, a witness, and in some ways the prisoner of my own choices. And yet, as I looked out the window at the city sleeping beneath the endless sky, I realized something. Even in darkness, there is power in courage. Even when the night feels eternal, we can still find our own light. I wrapped the velvet object tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility in equal measure. The night awaited, endless and patient, and I understood, fully, that some nights never end, not because they must, but because we carry them with us forever.